I want children to be resilient. And I think that as a teacher and a principal, I've seen a lot of that disappear. It's understandable. The world seems to be scarier than it used to be. Now the figures tell us that's not actually true, but the press tells us it is. And so I think we tend to get very worried about things that are not likely to happen. But I totally understand that. But it also means that we don't give children very much independence, or not as much independence as they had. When I was a child, we would get on our bikes on Saturday morning and we wouldn't get home until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And the only rule really was that you get home before dark. I would never do that with a child now. And I think that's sad. I think the other thing that we've done is we've tended to, because we worry about our children so much, because we're all so busy, I think we tend to try and solve their problems for them. And we're finding in schools that children are not as good at problem solvers as they used to be. And they're not as resilient as they used to be. Small things will upset them. We've discovered that we don't really allow them to fail very much, or that's starting to change. I have to say to you that educators have woken up that actually is a very bad thing to do. And we're now allowing children to fail because that's how you learn. And we've sort of thought, well, actually, we'll make you happy by not letting you fail, and what we've done is we've failed our children in some ways. So I think what I want children to understand is you can make a mistake, you can mess up, you can get into trouble, but that doesn't mean, that just means it's something that you've got to think about, what mistake did I make, and fix it up the next time. So that's one thing that I think is really, really important. It's important that when you get into big trouble over something, you understand why that's happened, and you understand how to, and you start thinking about problem solving and how to fix it. I want children to have independence. I know, again, that's restricted because of the kind of world we live in, that they can, even if it's their own backyard, climb a tree. And we even stopped that. I mean, in our schools now, we're worried about children climbing. We've banned somersaults in some schools. We've banned all sorts of crazy things, which I don't think is a good thing necessarily. When we were children, it was kind of a rite of passage. You climbed a tree, you fell out to break your arm, and it probably was it mended crookedly, and and you got up and you moved on. Now it seems to be that we don't want our child to feel any hurt, any harm, and we really don't learn from that. There's a wonderful book called, I think it's called Beautiful Boys to Good Men, that talks about what happens when children don't have independence and resilience, and they don't learn to understand from their past mistakes. And the conclusion from that book is many of them end up in very bad places, quite often in jail. And I believe it's because we don't actually teach children that it's okay to make a mistake, but let's talk about what you're going to learn from that mistake, and let's next time not do it. And let's take responsibility for it. I mean, that's the other thing. You've got to be responsible for what you do. So my children, in one of my books, and I have to say, this is a really hard thing with books these days, is allowing your children to be independent. If you read books from the 50s, and if I go back to my childhood, we sort of ran wild to some extent. Now I have a constant worry about allowing my children to be away from their parents in my books, because I'm frightened that someone will say, well, no one would allow a child to go off by themselves. And it's been really hard to find excuses why children would be somewhere by themselves rather than under some sort of supervision. For example, in my fourth book in my second series, they were on a sailing boat, alone. That was really hard to work out how I could allow them to be doing that with their parents' permission. When these days a lot of parents wouldn't allow that. In my day they would. My father had a little boat on the River Murray, and we would go out in the boat, and we'd all learned how to use the boat and things like that. So I want children to be able to see that it's okay to do things and make mistakes and to learn from them, as long as you don't do yourself any harm. So that was I think that's the second thing. I want them to be resilient. I want them to feel confident. I want them to think that life is an adventure rather than just something you have to get through. and I want them to find enjoyment in their friends. It's the other thing. There's a very strong theme about the close friendships between the children in my books. In my second series, there's 3 children, and another child comes into the mix in the second book of the series, and there's a lot of conflict between the 2 girls because they happen to be cousins. And I wanted that to show what happens there and how the whole group to begin with really don't take to this girl, and then over time they actually understand that she's the way she is because she has no confidence. And when you get to know her and when she gets friendship from them, it changes her completely. So I want them to be able to see those sorts of things as well.